Welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast. My name is Stephen Clark and I'm joined with always by my co-host, Nick Ponte. How are you, Nick?
Yeah, I'm good, man. What's happening?
Good. We have got a great guest lined up today. We've got Stephanie Taylor, who's covering a strategy or a couple of strategies that we've never featured much on the podcast, and one of them is rent to rent.
Rent to rent success. She's well known for a book that she's got out, and she's very prominent on social media and also got her own podcast as well. So we'll put the links to the show notes. But it was great chatting with Stephanie because, like you say, rent to rent is a strategy that we don't talk about much up here. One of the reasons is not a lot of people do HMO, whereas in England, that's a very hot strategy to pursue. But I do know quite a few successful people that are doing it with the serviced accommodation model, where basically you rent a property from the landlords and you guarantee them a rent. Basically, what you're doing is you're taking away the hassle from the landlords and you're managing the property and you're either subletting it on Airbnb and booking.com. That's where a lot of people are doing quite good things.
And they're making the uplift in the rent. And I like this strategy because obviously you and I are both kind of investors at heart. So we want to own our own assets and, increase the cash flow, increase the net worth, pay down the debt. But if you're looking to start out in property and you're young, and you might only have a couple of grand available, this is a very, very low entry point into property, isn't it? Because you can kind of learn, like Stephanie went into a lot of details of the lessons they learn up front and starting this kind of rent-to-rent business. It's obviously gave them the capital to then go and buy multi-units, which they've just bought a block of 12 flats as well, that they're now obviously adding assets to their portfolio. So it's a good entry point, isn't it?
Yeah, because you don't obviously have to have the cash, you just need a little bit like we talked about. But one of the things that we should say is it does come with its risks as well, because you're not in full control. Okay, you can have the lease or the management contract or whatever, but you're really at the mercy of the landlords, to be honest with you. And if something starts going wrong, or if you're doing the serviced accommodation, you start getting party goers, and then neighbours start complaining and stuff like that, then you could run into kind of problems. But I think there's certainly a lot of people out there that are doing well out of it, and it's definitely one that the listeners, if you're looking to get started out, a couple of these rent to rents could get you going.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephanie did touch on that as well, that the opportunity that she spotted in the market was she was taking that service away from the landlord and the pressure away from them, completely managing the property for them. Obviously, the tired dated property they were spending their own money on renovating, bringing up to a nice cosmetic standard, a better standard accommodation, and getting the uplift. So yeah, if you can make it a win-win for all parties, then you should be able to keep the landlord happy, to keep the contract going.
Cool. We'll just jump into the interview with Stephanie Taylor.
So welcome Stephanie Taylor to the Scottish Property Podcast. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's amazing to be here. And I probably said to you guys that I used to live in Scotland, in Edinburgh, for 15 years, from 2000 to 2015. So I really love Scotland.
Nice.
I can hear the accent coming out a little bit there, actually.
Yeah.
The hybrid accent. And where's it you're based now?
In Wales, and I grew, and there's no Welsh accent either. I'm very, very disappointing for accents, really. And I grew up in Birmingham, but I haven't even got the Birmingham accent either. So, yeah.
Probably not a bad thing, actually. Can you give the listeners a little bit of background on yourself and how you started in property?
You see how people are. Just because you've got the best accent in the world, this is how you're treating people.
It's probably the sexiest accent in the world, so I heard.
Oh, you're taking it up a notch.
Yeah.
Your head doesn't look too sexy at the moment, mate. That's for sure.
I hope you guys are listening to this and not watching it on YouTube.
Oh, we're going to be visual as well, are we? I'm glad I put my lippy on. Okay, so I'm Stephanie Taylor. I'm a property investor. I started in property 6 years ago, and I just am so delighted that I did, and excited by what you can do in a short period of time. I invest with my sister, and I started off in the rent to rent, as we were talking about, where you're making money from other people's properties, but in an ethical way. And then we went into buying our own properties, and we started buying multi-unit blocks. We started off with trying to buy HMOs, and you know how it is in property and in business in general, things don't go to plan, and we accidentally ended up buying multi-unit blocks, and we've just gone on from there. Our biggest one is at the moment is 12, and our smallest ones are 4. And we just love that strategy so much that what we want to do going forward is to really buy bigger sites with more potential for higher number of units.
So when you say multi-unit blocks, are we talking about blocks of flats here?
Yeah, sorry, I keep going into this lender speak. This is how lenders talk it. It's blocks of flats, yeah, but it's rather than purpose-built blocks of flats, it's conversions. There's a bit of extra magic and cherry on the cake with conversions, because often the conversions are all on one title. And with a conversion, it's really much easier to be able to add value, because often they're owned by individuals, private landlords, who haven't necessarily always kept them up to a par. So it's really easy to go in. And when you increase the rental income, you increase the value of the property. So it's much easier to increase the asset value than it is on a typical, buy-to-let residential.
So the valued based on the commercial income from it rather than the bricks and mortar value then?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time the lenders do mix it up in how they value it, but just that rental income is so much more important for that block of flats type of property than it is for your average buy-to-let property.
Brilliant. Take us back to the start. And did you build up your pot of cash to get into these multi-unit blocks through your rent-to-rent business then?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And how did you kick off that? Because it's a strategy that we've not often talked about in the podcast. Because myself and Nick are kind of first and foremost investors, so we've never went down the kind of rent-to-rent route. So it's quite interesting to hear a refreshed approach to it.
Yeah. So basically, I was not really aware of the business world as something that I could get involved in, or the property world as something that I could get involved in. And about 6 years ago, I was working at a bank. I was a financial services contractor, and earning a decent income. Kind of felt kind of comfortable. I felt on my feet, but didn't really like that the atmosphere at the bank and the stress and the hours and so on. And my mum got ill, and I just thought one day it just hit me. I wanted to be able to be more flexible. She lived in Birmingham, or she lives in Birmingham. At the time I was living in Bristol. And I thought, oh, what about if I wanted to go and spend a little while with her, a few weeks or months? Or I just thought I need to be able to work this out. How do people do this stuff where they don't work? And I was sort of stressed. I was sort of thinking about it, mulling it over. And I thought, property, because I've seen normal people become millionaires accidentally in property. So maybe even I could, with a bit of intentionality behind it, do something. So I started to go to all these events, the property events, and there was quite a lot in Bristol at the time, at least one a week and sometimes more. And so I would be regularly going to these events, and I was blown away because I just saw all the people were coming and saying what they've been doing. And of course, there were all of those strategies that take a lot of money, a lot of, a higher level of knowledge than I felt that, I had or was achievable for me. But then I heard about this rent to rent, where you're renting other people's properties and renting them out again. And I Googled and online, and I could see a lot of people were doing it without any care, looking at pictures and so on, and the way they were talking. And I thought, I could do this better just by adding care. I didn't have a huge amount of confidence overall, but I was confident that I could run these properties with more care than they were being run, and make a success of that part.
And was that the whole plan? Was just thinking, you spotted opportunity and these look pretty crap, I can do a bit better.
Yes.
A bit better job of them.
Yes.
And did you go and get formal education to understand the process?
Yeah, I went on a day's course because I just like to know what's what beforehand and have the overview of it. And basically, just in case any listeners are thinking rent to who, say rent to rent is where normally, as you guys know, you buy a property and then it becomes an asset of yours and you make money. So let's just say you're putting 50k into a property in terms of deposit, buying costs, refurbishment. That would be a small amount to put in actually, and that's tied up in that property for a while. and then you make 200 and 300 pound a month. That's the typical way that most people understand buy to let. So you think you need a lot of those 50,000 pounds to gradually build up those 200-300 pounds. But with rent to rent, what you do is you rent the asset with the full knowledge of the owner, and then you make between 500 and over £1,000 a month. I do it with house shares, HMOs, but a lot of people do it, especially in your neck of the woods in Scotland, with service accommodation. And it really means you can make more money out of the property. The owner is delighted with you because they're getting guaranteed rent, freedom from tenant management, total peace of mind. And for you, you're putting more legwork into it and you're getting more money out of it without needing to make that big investment. So I just thought it's a phenomenal strategy because little money is needed to get started. You've got that recurring revenue, and you've even got the names and addresses of your perfect customers because the councils all have to produce a list of the HMO landlords. So so that was what drew us into it, really, and it worked out great for us.
Yeah, and I think we should dive into the whole rent-to-rent strategy and the pros and cons of it a little bit later on. But I'm really interested. You brought us up to that point where you got kind of yourself educated about the rent-to-rent. Now, at that point, you're still working for the bank, I presume.
Yes.
So how did you get to that point now where you're sitting now in your kitchen with your rent-to-rent success book? You're an author, you're a podcaster, you're a property investor that's built up a good portfolio. How did you get to that point?
Yeah, and I'm confident to speak to you guys or to anybody. And I wasn't that person when I first started out. I think one of the things is it really changes you as a person as you see what you can create in property and in business and elsewhere. So
I think that's quite an interesting point, actually, which most people don't say. It's we all focus on the property and the business and what you're achieving in it, but you don't actually. I've not heard that many times that people say it's the person that you've then become since you grow in business and you become more successful. Like you say, you're more confident to speak and become an author and put yourself out there. So yeah, that's probably a bigger achievement than the business side of it, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I love to think about, and especially because it's the beginning of the year, is something that Dan Sullivan says, which is your future is your property. And I've added on, and ain't nobody else building on it but you. So how I was living my life before, I was not building on my property. I was not architecting. I was not creating whatever I wanted for my future and starting building it now. But now I think being in property, and guys, we all talk about mindset. When I was first coming into it, I was kind of rolling my eyes at that because I didn't understand the importance. But now I get the importance, which is that once you see it in your mind, you begin creating it, you design it, and you also start building it intentionally because you know what's going to be there when you arrive in 5 years, in 10 years, in whatever years time, because you're making it happen from now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. I love that. Sorry, I interrupted there. Can you get back to the next question? Sorry, mate.
Yeah, sorry, I've answered a different question. So Nick asked me, how did I go from doing that course? I was at my job, minding my own business, and all of this seemed a little bit far-fetched, and a little bit, I wondered if it would actually work. So I'm at my job, and I just think, what can I believe here? I can believe that I can do it with care. I really believed in that. And I didn't know if it would work out or not, but I just said to myself, what's the worst that could happen? Because I was having so much fear coming up. And I just realized that actually the worst that could happen is that it doesn't work out and I have to get another job. So actually, I'm back in the same exact position. But now I know that I've tried. So I actually feel better than if I hadn't. And just knowing that, that just gave me the freedom to go out there and do it, and to feel a bit scared, to feel uncomfortable, to walk into a letting agent and ask them if they've got any HMOs. And I was so nervous to do that. I mean, my heart feels like it's racing. I'm maybe thinking about it, that moment when I was standing outside thinking, shall I go in, or what shall I say, or they're not going to like it. But I had heard and read that you have to get a lot of no's, and I thought, well, I'll just let this be the first no.
It's good to be looking at.
And was it a no then? Was the first one a no?
Well, Actually, the very first one, the one I'm thinking of, was a yes. But what happened was I was living in Bristol, and I was coming over to Newport in Wales on the weekend to do the viewings. And I had this viewing with an agent. We went to see 3 properties, and it was a Saturday morning. So she'd given up her Saturday morning to do this with me. And I said something on the way back, which really cheesed her off. And so there was a frosty atmosphere. I wasn't intending to cheese her off, but I realize now that it was just a stupid thing to say.
What did you say? We need to know.
I said I was going to manage my own properties.
All right.
So she's realized that she's just wasted all her time. And I hadn't explained it in a way where I'm explaining that she gets what she wants. And so do I. I hadn't explained it. And she never responded to any further correspondence from me. So when I got out of her car, I was feeling a bit shaky because you just realize that you've made a blunder, and you haven't done what you anticipated to do, what you wanted to do. And there were all of the, you know how in a lot of cities, the letting agents are all in one place, and the letting agents are all in one place. I'm now in that place, and after that, I'm going to get the train and go back home, which is not close. So I just thought, I was giving myself all the reasons why I shouldn't do it. Now's not a good time. You should wait till you get home. Definitely. You need to reassess, blah, blah, blah. And then I thought, you know what? You're here now. Just go in one. So I went in one, and that going in the one, which was a big chain agents with lots of ones across the country. So it shouldn't really have worked. And I said to her, have you got any HMOs? I was supposed to say something much more sophisticated than that. And she said, no, they don't do things like that, she said. And then she started telling me about how head office would say this and that and all the rest of it. But I got a moment of inspiration because I just said, oh, yeah, totally can appreciate where you're coming from, because you would really want to have seen the evidence of what we do so you can have confidence, so you can talk to your head office. But what about the landlords who are tenant find only? Do you have any like that who might be interested in what we're doing, a long-term rental? And then the landlord can make the decision themselves. And luckily she did have a landlord who was tenant find only, because she started shuggling me to these big screens, and that was it. We ended up booking to see those 2 properties, and we ended up taking them on, and we've still got them now. And the contracts that we've extended will total 8 years now that we've had those properties.
Wow, that's really interesting. And there's a lot to take away from what you just said there. I think one of the biggest fears is the rejection, isn't it? When people start out and they're getting the no. So that mindset of overcoming that, I find really interesting. What I think, like, where a lot of people maybe fall down is they look for this magic formula, and, you know, they maybe go on a course, and, you know, the person who's selling the course will say, we'll give you the scripts, you know, like, we'll give you everything that you need to say to the agent. But like, if you go in there with a script and it just sounds robotic and it's not natural and you just don't get that rapport in the chat, it's never going to work, is it? Because at the end of the day, property is like a people business, isn't it? So I would imagine in your rent to rent side, it's even more about dealing with people and building up relationships and that. So, you know, what are the tips for people to make that first step to pick up the phone landlords, contact agents? Because that can be very hard.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Nick? What you said is so important. It's not the script, it's you. And so the number one thing that I've taught people the scripts. And so I know that that's not the answer. People think that that's what they need. But what people need is the belief. So I always say, sell yourself first. What exactly are you offering? Why is it amazing? So when I was starting, you can't tell yourself any kind of bullshit. You've got to tell yourself something that you actually believe that's true. So when I was starting, I couldn't say some of the things like I can say now to myself that made me feel really good. And like, if they come to us, it's an incredible service. They cannot find better than us anywhere. I can totally believe that now because I've got so much evidence for it. But when I was starting out, all I could believe was that I am going to manage your property with exceptional care, that I'm going to do absolutely the best I can for you. When I have that certainty in my heart, in my body, in my bones, when I speak to you, I'm not coming across as brash or overconfident or anything. I'm coming across as somebody who's absolutely going to do a great job for you that no other letting agent can do, because a lot of letting agents, in terms of HMOs, a lot of letting agents have got hundreds of properties, and they're not, at the time when I was doing it, there weren't that many specialist HMO letting agents, and certainly not in our area. So now they've not only got you, who's a specialist HMO letting agent, and an individual person. So if they call you about their property, they know that you know who they are, what their property is, and they know that you know the tenants who were in there and everything about it. Whereas if you call your agent, you've got to spend the first 10 minutes explaining who you are, who your property is, and everything that's happened previously. And you're probably talking to somebody who's quite young, nothing wrong with youth, but inexperienced and doesn't really understand, especially from a landlord's, perspective, an investor perspective.
Can you talk us through the numbers of those first two deals? Like what type of investment that you had to come up with originally to get the properties to the right standard, and what was the rent agreed at, and what was the rent that you put out at?
Well, I have to give a disclaimer here. When we first did it, we paid a lot of money. We were so keen. And that's, the landlords absolutely did get an incredible deal. And we spent a lot of money, and we didn't know the contractors in our area. And well, let me just give you a quick example. So the guy, the landlord, he was going to take a chance on us too. And he'd been a landlord for over 30 years. So he'd seen it all. He said he didn't even know if we were lost. But he kind of thought that we looked honest or seemed honest, and he just had a good feeling. So he just decided, you know what, I'm gonna take a chance on these two. And he only told us this years later. But he told us he's got a decorator, right? So we thought, oh, amazing, because we wanted to freshen the pace up, and we'd already told him this. And he said the decorator's £800 for the two properties. It was a 5-bed and a 4-bed. We could not believe it. We were just like, this is ridiculous. Oh my gosh, this Newport is so much cheaper than anywhere else that I've known of. Anyway, the decorator comes round and he humors us as we walk around the whole house, explaining, because some of the wood is like wood brown with a varnish on, but we want it all to go to white gloss or white eggshell. I can't even remember what it was. And we were having different colored emulsions and walls. So we went around the whole house and we were highlighting this and highlighting that. And at the end of it, we said to him, okay, so when can you start? And he says, oh, sorry, love, this is not the sort of job I can do. I just slap on a bit of white ceilings, floors, ceilings everywhere. They're just white paint everywhere. This is, and that was that. And then we had to find someone to turn around these two properties really quickly, which it wasn't a one-man band, you see, because one-man bands can't do it in that time frame. And so we ended up getting quite a big company who didn't really want to do it, and they quoted accordingly. So, so it ended up being a very expensive learning program, and we spent 12 grand. But they've been amazing properties for us because, as I say, originally he signed up for 3 years. I think we wanted to sign for 5, but he thought 3. That was our minimum. And since then, he's extended for another 5, so 8 altogether. So although we pay that 12, every month we make on that property £605 on the 5-bed and 400 and something on the 4-bed. And so
it did take paid back within the first year.
Yeah, that's much longer than we advise people now, because the landlords do, as a property owner, you kind of expect to pay. And if somebody puts towards it, you're more than happy with that. And so nowadays we invest a lot less, but what we realize, the value of our services is that once we start paying you, we're going to pay you every single month. And that's all through the lockdown, all through whatever else has happened during the periods where we've had it. We've never, ever had a landlord give us a property back. And that's because they cannot get the service that we provide them anywhere else, whether they do it themselves or whether somebody else does it for them.
Sorry, on you go, Steve.
I was going to ask, how did your business go through lockdown with a lot of the HMOs? Did a lot of the tenants leave? Were you kind of obligated to still pay the contracted rent to the landlords?
Yeah, I mean, we could have gone back. So we teach other people how to do it. And we have buffer in our business because we've been doing it for a while now, and that's just how the way we roll. We put the money back in the business, so we've always got money there. Excuse me. But what I say to people is you can go back and you can negotiate, because landlords are, living in the world too and appreciate what's going on. And you can say, you know what, I'm going to have to give your property back, or I'm going to have to reduce the rent, and then the landlord can choose yes or no, whether they agree with it or not. And then you might fall back to your contractual agreement, which we have always got, that you can give notice. So you might have to fall back to that level. But with us, we just wanted to give everybody who we're working with, because we can afford to do so, the experience that they originally signed up for, which is guaranteed rent. Although we have updated our contracts now to say that if there's any lockdowns or similar, there could be anything. It might not be called coronavirus lockdown next time, but if our business cannot operate as it normally does, i.e. we can't move people in, then we can renegotiate the rent or exit the contract. So that just gives us a little bit more flexibility. But we were about 30% down, 20%, 30% down. It varied. When they did that first lockdown, nobody could move and everyone was terrified. Do you remember? It was really scary. And that was before the government said, and I just realized that landlords are going to have to bridge the gap, because the government told everybody they don't have to move out, they don't have to pay their rent, and landlords are getting a holiday, they were saying. And so that was before they announced the God, what's that word called? Furlough. That was before they announced the furlough, right? So we just thought, oh, well, as people are being made redundant and all that, we're going to be, as landlords, bridging that gap. But luckily the government stepped in. So actually that protected us so much, because when people were made unemployed, not only were they getting, some people were getting furlough, but the rest were getting universal credit. And previously they wouldn't have been eligible to get universal credit so quick. And secondly, the amount of universal credit they would have been much lower, but the government increased the amount of universal credit and made it more widely available. So that really protected landlords and others in our situation, because people could still pay their rent even if they had lost their job.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Amateur.
Shocking behaviour that coming on the Scottish Property Podcast. How rude! Not.
We're actually going to have to edit this out now. We never edit anything.
I'll leave it in. Leave it in.
I was interested in this because it all sounds great, when you see the numbers and all the rest of it, but obviously when you get such high rewards, and I have looked into it, and I know that a lot of people do very well out of it and they make really good profit out of it. But obviously with the good profits comes at risk as well. Yes. So you're talking about 12k investment there to get the property up to standard. That's, like you said, you do it for a lot less now.
Yeah.
But even if it was 5 or 6, how do you mitigate that risk that the landlord doesn't just come along and say, I want the property back?
Yeah. Well, it is all about relationships. We don't even actually usually put 5 to 6k. This is how we do it. Just I'll talk about the investment and then I'll talk about mitigating the risk. So the investments now is we will go in and we'll look at the property and we'll say, okay, if this property is brought up to lettable standard or lettable for us standard, then we could offer you, £2,000 a month or whatever it is, £3,000 a month. And then there's a conversation about how to bring it up to lettable standard. So then sometimes they will want to do that themselves and pay for that work, and we will oversee it. And depending on the size of the project, normally we'll do that free, overseeing the works and everything, which is really handy for out of town owners. But other times they might say, no, I'm not putting any money into this property. That's it. This is how you're getting it. And then there might be occasions where we want to pay because, say, if it's a really good cash flowing property or we can see potential in it, we might want to pay. And so there's different ways we can do it. So one is we can say, okay, well, we'll pay. It'll be about £3,000. We'll keep the rent until it's repaid. That's one way. Another way, and this is one that actually true life, we put £3,000 into a property and we offered the landlord over 5 years, £100 less a month. So instead of 1,100, it was going to be 1,000. Or we take all of the money back from the first few months' rent, thinking he would say, the first one because the second option costs him £6,000 over the term. And he chose the second option. So we put the £3,000 in and it cost us £6,000 less over the term that we had it. So how do we mitigate the risk? I think one of the ways is to have the right contracts. The contracts, we prefer to use a lease contract. A lease contract means that we have the property for the term of the lease guaranteed. If the owner dies, the lease still continues in place. Although, of course, if somebody died and then their family didn't want to carry on, we would then negotiate. But the contract says that the lease is still in place.
So I've heard people talking about, management contracts. So this is
Yes.
different. This would be different to a management contract. This is an actual lease.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think just a wee caveat for the listeners here, obviously, Stephanie's talking from the English point of view, legal system. So this may not apply in Scotland, but in general terms, we're just talking about how Stephanie does things.
Yeah. So yeah, there are two types of agreement: management agreement and lease agreement. Management agreement you would always use for a letting agent and so on. And for a landlord, the property owner, you can use a lease agreement or you can use a management agreement. We prefer the management agreements. We prefer the lease agreements because I think it's more protection on both sides that this is it and this is what we're doing. But you can use either, whichever suits yourself, and your business. So that's how we mitigate the risk. And the other part is that mostly when things go wrong, you're not depending upon the contract. The contract is there, but we're not really looking to be taking people to court, and the landlord is obviously not looking to take us to court. What we're looking to do is to negotiate. And I think, from yourselves in business, negotiation is the way forward. What we're trying to do with everything that we do is have a win-win, that people actually are delighted that they were working with us. They're not just satisfied. They're like, we'll be singing and tap dancing. So usually we don't have an issue with that because they can see actually these, this has been amazing. It's been great. And we usually say goodbye in the same way that we say hello.
And what horror stories have you got for us then? There must have been some things that have gone wrong over the years. How long have you been going at this now?
Yeah, 6 years. So there have been some horror stories. And I think what you really get good at is just reading people. I'm one of those sorts of people. I didn't really used to notice detail, but now my antennae are just constantly up. I can see who people are. So
bullshit detector.
Yeah. Yeah, loving it, Steve. Steve's just telling it like it is, laying it down. But what I mean is, when you get to see all these tenants, because at the beginning I was doing all of the tenant viewings, tenant management and everything myself, everything in person with the tenants I was doing. So what I started to see was that for HMOs, it's really important that people can get on, that, they can be polite and give and take and all of that. And how they show you that at the beginning is all of their messages where you're arranging up the viewing. That shows you who they are, how they show up, what they're like. Obviously, you do have to make allowances. Not everybody is English first language. So sometimes, obviously, that's going to make a difference. But mostly you can tell how they're coming across on that part. Then when you turn up to the viewing, there's just two things, because I had to pass this knowledge on to Luke, who's now our property manager. And I didn't think I could do it, but I broke it down to a simple way for him to look at, right? We had our paperwork side that he looked at, so he knows what to look for there. So when the person's in front of you, what do you look at? So what I like to look at is, are they friendly and polite? It's a very low bar. But if they can't be like friendly and polite at the viewing where they're putting their best foot forward for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, it's not going to work. Because if they haven't got those skills, not everybody has those skills to be able to interact and get on with other people. And they need to have those skills to be able to move into the HMO. So that's where some of the nightmares have come from, which made me think of that. And that's why I've taught him all of that, because one of the nightmares was a few years ago, I think it was either 2000, I think it might have been 2018. There was a snow in March.
The beast from the east.
Yes, yes. Yeah, there was snow in March. It was high. It was halfway up people's doors. And Luke, our property manager, lives in the sticks. So because I'm in town, there was a move-in to do. So normally I wouldn't have been doing that move-in, but he couldn't get out of his house. And the roads where he was treacherous as well. But I'm in town and where it was fine. So I went to move this person in. And as soon as I walked into the room, I thought, oh, this is not going to go well, because the person was just pacing the room. He couldn't actually sit down we do a check-in where we go through everything they need to know and all of this. And I was showing him, I've been talking to him, and he was pacing. And not only was he pacing, but he was talking BS, let's use Steve's word, as well, about how amazing he was, what a great guy he was, and all of this, and pacing. And I thought, oh, there's something wrong with this guy. This is not normal behavior. And so anyway, the following day, he hadn't even been in there 24 hours before the first complaints came in. but how we deal with it is, again, it's really a negotiation, because what we realize is you don't want to be dealing with the court system, because if you're trying to evict somebody through the courts, it used to take 3 to 4 months at a minimum. And now it's like 6 months minimum and way beyond. So it's not even worth going there as far as asking people to leave through the court system. So for a HMO, because you can't risk that everybody else is going to leave because of somebody who's been disruptive. So negotiation, how we do it with negotiation is everybody has a point at which it's more beneficial for them to go than it is for them to stay. And you just have to find what that point is. And we find that people are very reasonable. And a lot of these people are chaotic. Their lives are chaotic. It's not like logic that's driving them. But there is still a point at which they would go. And usually it's much less than what people might think. So I think with that person, we gave back the portion of their rent, because they will pay the rent on the 1st. And say if this is now the 15th, we would offered back the portion that's after the 15th. And we said we wouldn't chase him up there was some damage. We wouldn't chase him up for the damage. And we would give back the deposit. And so he moved out for that, which was absolutely amazing for us. And so that's what we think is the best way.
That's quite an interesting point, actually. It must be quite difficult managing HMOs with different personalities. But one thing you touched on there was you mentioned Luke, the property manager, from quite early on. And I was going to ask you how you kind of scaled up this business from obviously 6 years ago starting to scaling up to employ, a team, staff, and grow it to the point where you guys have now moved on to bigger and bigger things on your property business.
What have you guys got at the moment anyway? Like how many, you call it units in HMO, right? So that would be each room, what you...
Yeah. So it's just over 100 that we're managing in the property management business, and it's 28 units in it that we own. And I think with the next deal, we just realized that when you're doing 12, you may as well be doing 20 or more. Even when you're doing...
How many rooms do you have in the average house? I mean, are you talking about 5-6 bedrooms in a house?
Yeah, mainly. So we've got about 20 HMOs under management, and the ones that we own, we've got an 8 units, 4 units, 4 units, and 12 units. Oh. So that's the 28 is across 4 properties, which if we come on to multi-unit blocks after, I'll be able to explain why I love multi-unit blocks. And I think that is absolutely the way forward, blocks of flats.
Sorry, going back to Stephen's question there about scaling up the business.
Yeah. So we used to do it, and we thought we were the bee's knees with the fluffy cushions we would put in there and all sorts of other things that now I look at and think, oh, what were you thinking? But we were thinking, oh, nobody else can style up the rooms like this. Nobody else can do this. It's going to be so hard to get someone. And we were trying to look for somebody to do it part-time. So to do the viewings part-time, or if somebody needed to be at a property to wait for a fridge freezer or something, we had somebody to call upon. and but we found we couldn't really make that work. And so in the end, we just thought, do you know what, we're gonna employ someone full time, and they have apprentices. And I don't know if they have that I'm guessing they do in Scotland also. But with the apprenticeship scheme, the one that was in Wales at the time, and I know they have different ones in England, you would get half of the salary paid for 6 months. And then after that, you would pay the whole salary. And so we took Luke on that. And it was his first job. And he's just basically learned the whole business. And, we've got systems for everything. So when he goes on holiday, I sometimes am the one who stands in, and I wouldn't be able to remember a thing, but a lot of it, we've got like an app where we do the check-ins. There's a check-in checklist. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to do. Check-out checklist and all what to do, so that we've got the same information for everybody who
Did you
checks
guys
in.
create the old systems before you employed Luke at the start?
Well, I'll just even take a step before that, because we created some of them. And I'll tell you the best one for HMO landlords is who are self-managing, who want to outsource, is the onboarding. And so I onboarded the first 9 tenants. We had those 2 properties, a 5-bed and a 4-bed. And I said to myself at the time as I was doing it, I'm never doing this again. So after all of it had been done, I sat down with Nikki and we wrote down everything that happened. What emails did we send? What emails did I send on spare room, to book the viewings? What information did we ask for? We did some automated forms for people to fill in, reservation form, tenant information form. We worked out what criteria are we wanting from people when we look at their papers, etc. So we wrote all that down and created a flow chart. And then we put it on. At the time we used Excel, but now you would use like Asana or Trello or something like that and share it with your VA. And so each person is a little box on the thing and moves across to the different parts of the process. Because with onboarding, it's very important, because there's legal implications. It's very important that you can oversee what other people are doing on your behalf. So we created part of the system, that part. And then as it went on, we worked with the VA to create more systems. She could create those systems. And when we took Luke on full time, at that time, there wasn't enough work for both of them. And so Luke just did all what the VA had previously been doing.
Right. I am really interested in this whole thing about getting involved in property with no money, right? And this is a strategy that gets bandied about as getting property with no money. So can you do rent to rent with no money?
Yeah, I want to say no, right? Because you do need money. So you either need your own money or you need other people's money. And what I really advise people to do is you've got to get yourself in the right place mentally to have a business. And so sometimes if people come to me and they say, I've got £60,000 worth of debt or £70,000 worth of debt, or I've got bad credit or whatever, that is not so much the issue. What the issue is where you are in your mind space. So if you've got 60 grand worth of debt and you're paying it off, you've got more money coming in than going out, you've got your shit together now, that's fine. Go ahead, start your business. If you're in a crazy mess, you've got bills coming in left and right, you don't know what, you're still not opening them, all of that, and it's like a storm in your mind, that is not the time. So you've got to get yourself into the right place, first of all. So you can do it if you've got bad credit, but you've got to have the right mindset. And how you know if you've got the right mindset is you look at what you're creating in your life. So if you're creating a situation where your income is greater than your outgoings, where you're paying off your debt each month, any debt you do have, then you're in a good position to move forward. If you haven't done that yet, then it's good to do we've got a 4-step credit success, which is how to get yourself to the place where you're ready to start a business. And so you can't do it with no money. You do need some money. It's not a lot of money. But you need to be in the space in your life where you've got more money coming in than going out. And how much do you need to start? You're probably going to ask me next. So it's about £600 to start up your business in terms of the compliance and everything, but you don't need to spend all of that money in one go. So your insurances, a simple web page, a business card. Some people do, some people don't. I kind of like it if you're going to see people.
I always find it funny how much time people spend on like logos and business cards. I did it myself, and I like went through the process like of days and days of like had lists of names and stuff for my business. I was like, I was really getting worked up about it. I still think my business name is pretty shit, and like, but like, it really doesn't matter. It does not matter.
It doesn't. And, you can always change as well. That's the thing, because you're small, it's when it takes a lot to change a business when you're big, but when you're small, it does not. So, so you need a bit of money for that. You need some money to pay the first month's rent. Although what we do advise people is if you can arrange with the landlord to pay to, middle or end of the month, you've got a bit of buffer if you get paid from tenants at the beginning, but have a couple of months rent. Sometimes you need a deposit, sometimes you don't. So you need some money. And I really love it if people are going to come to me and they've got extra money every month. So that's always building up. They've always got additional money that they can invest in their business if they want. So you need a lot less money than you do for other strategies, but you do need some, whether it's your own or whether it's other people's.
Yeah, absolutely. And you built up your capital pot using this strategy, which is like a kind of low entry point to now buying multi-unit blocks, which would be good to touch on now.
Yeah. Well, the amazing thing about it, Steve, is that the amazing thing that I've now forgotten is, the experience it gives you.
Yeah.
Because confidence is so key, because we would have just gone past this property and never ever in a million years thought, do you know what, I'll buy it. We can buy this. And the first one that we bought within the business is it's a commercial property opposite train station, great location, the residential area. It had in the past been a house. It was now an office D1 classification, and we bought it for £150,000, and we thought we could turn it into an 8-bed HMO. And our area is a bit more tricksy for HMOs. We think we could have got it on appeal, but our architect, we thought we could have had 3 flats, but our architects actually came up with 4 flats. And so that just made it really appealing to go to 4 flats. And that was really the start of, the love affair with the multi-unit block. And
you sourced that one on the market?
Yeah, just on the market. Yeah. That's the other thing. You know yourselves, guys, when you're in the area, you're in the area. So you just see what's going down, and also other people contact you about things. So we just saw it on the market. But the other amazing thing about multi-unit blocks, let me rave about blocks of flats, basically conversions, is most people are not looking for them. Like everybody and their dog are looking for an HMO, but most people are not looking for a multi-unit block. The other amazing thing is that most people are not looking for a multi-unit block if it's got any commercial property in it. So the other one of the other ones we bought was a 12 units with a shop included. So that, for financing terms, it's harder to finance. Most people can't finance because you need that commercial finance to be able to get that. Most people are not looking to get that. Most people are worried about the shop. So there's less competition. There's lower price per unit. So I'll give you an example of the 12 bed, which is that we bought it for 375. It was on the market for 440 originally. We bought it for 375, £32,000. That would be good, £32 per unit. And £32,000 per unit, you cannot even buy in the valleys of Wales a house or a 1-bed flat for £32,000. So we're in Newport, which is a city. And although it's sort of been the poor relation between Cardiff and Bristol, now that both Cardiff and Bristol are really taking off, lots of things are happening in Newport that's making it more of a place to be. We are but don't anybody come and invest here, PS. We're a semiconductor hub, so we have lots of people coming, clever people coming from all over the world to invest here. And yeah, there's lots of other reasons why Newport's changing.
No, it's good. And how did you fund these multi-blocks at the start? Was this your own cash that you built up in the business through the rent-to-rent model?
Yeah, well, as well as family and friends. So 50K was put in to one of the properties. And basically they just wanted to get their savings interest back. So 2% would have been like more than double what they were getting. So they agreed to that. But or they offered that, and when we tried to pay them the interest, they said, "Oh, just wrap it up at the end, Steph." So it really feels more like a gift than an actual.
2% is very low, isn't it? Like
it's brilliant when I hear stories like this, because like you say, it all comes down to the belief. People don't believe you can actually get money, and you get money at that low interest. But like you kind of rightly pointed out, if you don't even get 0.1% in the bank, then of course people are more than happy to give it out at that.
Yeah, well, they're just trying to help us.
Yeah,
but family and friends, I think, is a great place to start. So we had some of our own money, we had some of that, but we also were able to use commercial finance. When we came onto that 12 unit, that wasn't our first, thankfully, commercial property, because we already had that other one that we bought that we were converting into 4 flats. But I don't think they would have considered us when we tried to refinance the first one, let's go back. When we tried to refinance the first commercial property that we bought, we struggled to find a lender because we didn't have any commercial property previous, and they want to see you own the same asset class. And it was only that our broker was able to tell the story that we had managed all these properties, and at the time we had a little bit online and reviews and stuff like that. And before and after photos, we'd created a little one-pager about the stuff we'd done that the broker asked us to create, which we did do, and that helped us to get the borrowing for that first one. So that rent-to-rent experience turned out to be really, really important. And then when we got the other one, the 12 unit, it was much more exacting what they wanted out of us for that money. Oh my God. I thought people were exaggerating when they would talk about what the conversations were between themselves and the lenders. I can remember one time they were asking me, do I have other personal bank accounts, because they don't think there's enough transactions. And what is XYZ transaction? The detail that they want to go into about your finances is a lot. I thought.
But now you've got that track record and credibility in that space. Has it got easier then for the last couple?
Yeah, it has, because people know you, and obviously you're paying back the other people, and you've got the pictures of the property before, the property after, the income, and yeah, you grow and grow, and then people are more willing, because the thing with lenders is they want to take on zero risk and make a lot of money. That's what they want to do. And everything that they do in terms of the documents, the contracts, the questions are all designed to facilitate that. So we've got to take on all the risks of the property, the development, and the funding. And so that's just how you do it when you're. I was going to say when you're a developer. That feels like a bit of a heavy word, but yeah, we're.
How was the kind of the step up in projects from, cosmetically tarting up on HMO to converting into 4 flats, or doing a much bigger project?
Oh my God, bloody nightmare. That's what it was. So we had actually, luckily, we'd done a big refurbishment. I suppose it's all relative. It's small for some people, but we'd done a 70K refurbishment of 9 flats for not our own, for a landlord. And we'd managed that whole process. So we had some experience. It's mainly Nikki, my sister and business partner, who does the actual management of the refurbs. But we knew that going into doing the commercial to 4 flats, we actually only started the conversion although we've owned the properties since 2017, we had tenants, commercial tenants at the beginning, and their contract had ended by voluntary agreement on March 2020. So we were just at the beginning of lockdown starting. And of course, we all know what happened there. and we weren't using our normal builders. We were using a new team of builders. English wasn't their first language. And we had a surveyor to help us manage the process, because obviously it's not something that we're familiar with. But still, so much went wrong. It was ridiculous.
Can you talk us through a couple of stories of things that went wrong?
Well, one of the main ones was splitting the utilities is always a nightmare, and we'd had that before on different projects before that one. And but in COVID, it just took on new levels of ridiculousness. Like, you know, you wouldn't get an answer, and then they would say, "Oh, do you know what? We're coming in 2 months," and you're like, and then they would come out, look at what was there, say it was different to what was on their plans, and just go without even a by your leave. You know, no phone call, nothing. So you definitely have to be there whenever they're supposed to be coming out, and just sit and wait for them, because sometimes you wouldn't even get timings on it. So splitting the utilities was painful, and took a very long time. The build team, there were so many issues.
Just daily occurrences of nightmares and firefighting and problem solving.
Yeah, and I think it's partly to do with, you know, lack of experience on our part, but it's partly to do with, this is just the shit that happens when you're developing stuff. Because I actually listen to a lot of experienced developers talk about what happens to them, and you're like, whoa, that would really set the cat among the pigeons. But we've been fortunate so far with the lending that we've had. We needed to extend the borrowing that we had, and that was a very simple process, because getting the money in the first place was not a simple process. And what would happen was they would ask you question A, question B, question C. They would wait for 6 weeks at least, and then come back to you and say, could we now have question X, question Y, question Z? And actually, can you go back to question A, question B, and question C? And then they would wait another 6 weeks, and then they would say, oh yeah, we're just about to give you your money. Okay, let me ask you another question. You know, it just felt painful, the whole thing.
Yeah. No, it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal story as well of how you and your sister have came in such a kind of, people would say 6 years is a long time, but it's not. It's a short period of time in a new industry, and property is a difficult industry as well. So hats off to you guys for growing that business substantially. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, and do you know what I love about it, Steve, is that I would never have believed that this was possible for me. And it's crazy how much you can grow your money in a short period of time in property, because we're in a low capital value area, and you know, some areas of Scotland are like that as well. We bought that property, the one we bought for 375. It was on a 10x multiplier on rental income when we bought it. That's what it was valued at. It was 44k in income, and but it wasn't in a very good condition. That's why we ended up paying 375, and now the rental income is 660. So on a 10x, that would be 660k valuation. But even if it didn't come in 660, you know, it might be 600 or around there. It's still about a 200 grand
uplift,
on when we bought it, and we only bought that one in 2019. So it's really crazy what you can do. And what I love about it is that 5 years, I think, is a transformational time point. So we've got all these assets now in 5 years, and we owe a lot of money on them. But in the next 5 years, we'll owe less money, and likely values would have increased. So as time goes on, it goes into that sort of hockey stick curve of the benefit of doing
that net worth in the background. What's the plan for you guys for the next 5 years then? What is the plan for the business, and where do you kind of looking to take it?
Yeah, so we've got our rent to rent business, that's HMO Heaven, our property management business. So we're growing that. We've got Luke and a small team on it. And so in terms of my time, it doesn't take up a lot of my time, but I just love that business. I love having that business. And that business also obviously manages our own properties as well, which is fab. And because the management is where you really make the money, because it's over years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. you've got that consistency. Whereas when sometimes you give your property to letting agents and they don't work it. So 5 years, your money's going down, your value's going down. So anyway, so I love having that business. And then we've got our rent to rent success, where we help other people to set up their rent to rent business in an ethical way and make money without buying property. And we're growing that business. I spend a lot of time in there working.
How does that work then? Is it like a subscription model, or do they go on a course, or?
Yeah, they go on a program, a course, 3 months. But how we do it is we give them all the step-by-step info, but then we meet up with them every week, twice a week. And, there's a daily Facebook group as well, so that people really get that focused time with us to get the results that they want, because you do have to take action, and it is uncomfortable action, like talking to letting agents, talking to landlords, doing stuff you've never done before. And so we just want to help everybody through that process.
That sounds good. And for your own investment, your own portfolio, is that you're looking to grow that in the next 5 years as well?
Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to build up an education and accommodation trust, because we started off, later in life, so to speak. I just was starting to think about what are we going to do with all these properties, and that was the idea that came to me, is to have a trust where the properties are earmarked. Certain people or certain type of people can get these properties, and as part of living there, they also get the education, which you talk about on this podcast, which is how to use your brain to create the future you want for yourself, and B, how to use wealth. Because even if you don't invest in property, every single person who wants to can create more wealth, because we live in this country where that we've got access to money. And even if you've only got a small amount of money, most people who are listening to this can still save £50 a month, £100 a month, or thereabouts, to be able to build up their wealth. So we want to do a bigger deal, like I've talked to you about the size of deals we've been doing, but I'm thinking a 20 plus as the next one, and then possibly go up from there in terms of the sort of multi-unit blocks, or buying them as is quickly. I love buying them as is, because you don't have to convert them. You don't have to spend the money on conversion, which is expensive. You don't have to deal with builders and blah, blah, blah. You just do buy them, refurbish them. Okay, you do have to deal with builders a little bit. Refurbish them, and you get that uplift. So for me, it's more leveraged if you can buy a down at heel 20-unit block of flats, rather than if you buy a commercial building and convert it into a 20-unit block of flats.
Yeah, makes sense. No, thank you very much, Stephanie, for joining us. It's been such a great chat. It's a really, really good insight to rent, HMO, the management market, and obviously the multi-unit block of flats as well.
Where are you most active on the social medias? Is it Instagram we send people to?
Yeah, so if people want to get in touch with me, they can get me at rent2rentsuccess.com about rent to rent, or hmoheaven.co.uk about the property business. And I also got a coaching business where I show people how to use their mind more magnificently, because I get so excited about this stuff, because I just think if I'd known this like 20 years ago, where would you be? And that's at blowupyourlife.com. And on Instagram, Nick, I'm at Stephanie T Property.
Love
Excellent. We'll put the show notes. We'll put it in the show notes anyway, and links to your social media. That's great. If you could send that over to us, that'd be fantastic.
Okay.
Brilliant, Stephanie. Thank you very much for joining us on the Scottish Property Podcast. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Yeah, it's been amazing to be here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. So I hope you enjoyed that interview with Stephanie. Quite a good insight there. And obviously we talked a lot about HMO, but the same sort of stuff does apply to the serviced accommodation as well. So as always, guys, please leave us a review. I was actually speaking to one of our listeners the other day. She says, you and Stephen keep asking for reviews, but I don't know how to leave a damn review. So, so this one's for you, Radina. If you go to Apple Podcasts, if you listen on an iPhone, then it's quite easy, because on Apple Podcasts, you can just leave a review. If you're listening on Android, it's a little bit more complicated. You need to go to your Spotify, basically, and leave a review there.
Yeah. Thanks for the feedback as always, guys. I actually got approached in Aberdeen when I was getting valuations carried out last Wednesday, and someone came up to me, a really, really nice guy called Liam, and asked if I was Stephen Clark. He said, I listened to your podcast with Nick, love it. He just got his first renovation property in King Street in Aberdeen, so was telling me about that. So it was brilliant to kind of hear feedback and how the podcast kind of helps inspire and this kind of people we bring on as guests that inspire people to get involved in property. So thanks very much for the feedback, either the reviews or in person.
Great stuff, guys. We'll speak to you again next week.
Thanks a lot.